Picture this: you're standing in a quiet museum gallery, your eyes locked onto a small, weathered figurine resting behind glass. It's no larger than your palm, carved from bone or stone, its edges smoothed by time. But here's the thing, this object isn't just old, it's ancient, older than the pyramids, older than written language, older than the very concept of history as we know it. And yet, someone like you or me held it in their hands thousands of years ago, believing it carried a power beyond the physical. What did they see when they looked at it? What prayers, hopes, or fears did they whisper into its silent form? This is the mystery of sacred objects in prehistoric societies, a puzzle that stretches across millennia, connecting us to minds and hearts we can scarcely imagine. These artifacts aren't just relics of the past, they're portals. Every intricate carving, every carefully placed stone, every symbol etched into clay is a message from a world we've lost. Think about that for a moment. These objects survived floods, wars, the rise and fall of empires, and the slow erosion of centuries, all to reach us here now. They were treasured, perhaps even feared, by people who saw the divine in the ordinary, a shimmer in a piece of obsidian, a face emerging from wood or stone. And somehow they still speak to us, not in words but in questions. Why did a community labor for generations to drag massive stones across miles, building monuments that aligned with the stars? What compelled an artist to shape a goddess figurine with exaggerated features, cradling it like a promise of fertility or protection? The answers are elusive, but the search for them is irresistible. That's why we're diving into this enigma today, because these sacred objects aren't just about the past, they're about us. They remind us that humans have always sought meaning, always reached for something beyond the visible world. Whether it's a Paleolithic Venus statue or a Neolithic ceremonial dagger, these artifacts whisper of rituals, beliefs, and mysteries that shaped entire cultures. And here's the thrilling part, we're still piecing together their stories. Archaeologists uncover new clues, historians debate old theories, and every discovery invites us to rethink what we know about our ancestors' spiritual lives. So let's begin this journey together, step by step, artifact by artifact, into the shadows of prehistory, where the sacred and the everyday intertwined, and where the objects left behind still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered. So how do we recognize a sacred object when we see one? Without ancient instruction manuals or sacred texts to guide us, archaeologists rely on subtle but telling clues. Take materials, for instance. In many prehistoric cultures, ordinary objects became extraordinary through the care and rarity of their construction. A simple clay bowl might be used daily, but that same bowl, carved from rare volcanic glass or inlaid with seashells from distant shores, suddenly transforms into something special. The extra effort tells us this wasn't just utility, it was reverence. Then there's location. Imagine excavating a burial site and finding a figurine clutched in a skeleton's hands, or discovering a cache of ornate antler carvings placed precisely where sunlight strikes only during the winter solstice. These aren't random placements, they're intentional, almost like punctuation marks in a silent conversation between the living and the unseen, even where patterns matter. A statue polished smooth from generations of touch, or an amulet with holes drilled for cords to hang around a neck, these signs of use hint at objects that were handled, cherished, maybe even passed down like heirlooms of the soul. Symbols offer another layer of meaning. Spirals that mirror celestial movements, animals depicted mid-transformation, exaggerated human features that defy realism. These weren't just artistic choices. They were a visual language, a way to encode beliefs about creation, death, or the forces governing their world. And here's where comparative mythology becomes vital. By studying similar symbols across cultures, from the cave paintings of France to the totem poles of the Pacific Northwest, patterns emerge. A recurring bear motif might connect to strength or the spirit world. A zigzag could represent water, snakes, or the boundary between realms. But perhaps most fascinating is what these objects reveal about the people who made them. Sacred artifacts weren't created in isolation. They reflect entire communities pooling knowledge, resources, and faith. The massive stone circles requiring hundreds of laborers, the delicate carvings demanding master craftsmen, these were collective acts of devotion. They show us societies where the spiritual wasn't separate from daily life but woven into it, where every meal, hunt, or change of season might have been accompanied by rituals we can only begin to reconstruct. That's the heart of the mystery. Unlike modern relics labeled by their worshippers, prehistoric sacred objects come to us wordless. Their meanings are layered, shifting with each new discovery. A dagger might be a weapon, a status symbol, or a ceremonial tool, or all three at once. The Venus figurines could represent goddesses, fertility charms, or even early medical models. What's undeniable is their power to captivate us across time, silent witnesses to humanity's oldest questions and deepest yearnings. To understand sacred objects, we must step beyond the artifacts themselves and into the rhythms of the lives that used them. These weren't museum pieces locked behind glass. They were alive with purpose, activated by rituals that wove the sacred into the fabric of everyday existence. Picture a group gathered at the edge of a firelit cave, passing a carved bone figure from hand to hand as chants echo against stone. Or a lone shaman burying an offering of amber beads at the roots of an ancient oak, whispering pleas for a successful hunt. These moments lost to time were the heartbeat of prehistoric spirituality. Rituals gave structure to the unknown. In a world where storms could erase crops and predators lurked beyond the fire's glow, ceremonies offered a semblance of control, a way to bargain with forces greater than themselves. Take those enigmatic Venus figurines, their curves exaggerated, their faces often blank. While scholars debate their exact meaning, their placement tells a story. Many are found near hearths or burial sites, suggesting roles in rites of passage, births, deaths, or seasonal cycles. A mother might have clutched one during childbirth. A community buried another with their dead, believing it carried protection into the afterlife. The objects themselves were just one piece of a larger performance, props in a sacred theater where every gesture, chant, and offering held weight. Hunting rituals reveal another layer. Cave paintings of bison pierced with spears or antler carvings left at animal migration routes weren't mere art. They were acts of sympathetic magic, an attempt to sway reality through symbolism. If you sculpted a deer and ritually killed it, perhaps the real hunt would follow suit. This wasn't superstition. It was an early form of science, testing hypotheses about how to influence an unpredictable world. And it worked, not because magic was real, but because these rituals sharpened focus, coordinated groups, and passed down knowledge. A young hunter tracing his hand over a cave wall stag was learning anatomy as much as mythology. The social glue of ritual can't be overstated. When dozens labored to haul stones for a henge, or an entire village gathered to burn offerings in a pit, they weren't just worshipping, they were reinforcing bonds. Shared belief created shared identity. A child receiving a carved amulet during their initiation wasn't just gaining an object, they were being woven into the community's story. Even conflict resolution might have played out ritually, with opposing factions burying weapons under sacred stones to seal peace. What's astonishing is how echoes of these practices persist. The repetitive swirls on a 5,000-year-old pot mirror the mandalas used in meditation today. The act of leaving coins at a wishing well isn't so different from Bronze Age axe heads cast into rivers as votives. These parallels suggest something universal. Humans have always sought bridges between the mundane and the mystical. And while we may never fully decode the silent language of these rituals, their legacy lingers in the way we still mark births with heirlooms, seek luck with tokens, or gather in circles to honor what matters most. The sacred objects were never just things. They were conduits humming with the hopes of those who held them and waiting for us to listen. Among these enigmatic artifacts, the Venus figurines stand out not just for their age, but for the sheer intensity of debate they've sparked. Picture holding one in your palm, a tiny, weighty figure, her curves exaggerated, her face often blank or indistinct. She's been called a goddess, a fertility charm, even an ancient ideal of beauty. But here's what's fascinating. She wasn't made to fit into our modern categories. To her creators, she might have been all these things, and none of them. Take the Venus of Willendorf, perhaps the most famous of these figurines. Discovered in Austria and dating back nearly 30,000 years, her rounded form feels almost timeless. But look closer. Her hands rest on her breasts, her belly swells, and her carved hair coils like ritual headdresses seen in later cultures. Was she a prayer for abundance, a symbol of life's cyclical nature, or a sacred map of the female body? The truth might be more layered than any single theory. In some hunter-gatherer societies, women's roles as gatherers providing the majority of calories could have linked their bodies metaphorically to the land's fertility. A figurine like this might have been less about worship and more about acknowledging a fundamental truth. Survival depended on the interplay of human and natural cycles. Yet not all Venus figurines fit this mold. Some, like the Venus of Lascaux, stretch abstraction further elongated, almost geometric, as if the artist sought to capture an idea rather than a person. Others show signs of wear, smoothed by generations of handling, suggesting they were passed down as talismans. Imagine a mother tucking one into a birthing hut, or a community burying it with a child, hoping its power would follow into the afterlife. Then there's the provocative question of context. Many of these figurines were found not in grand temples, but in everyday spaces near hearths, in refuse piles, or alongside tools. This complicates the sacred narrative. Could they have been teaching aids, clan markers, or even early medical models? One striking theory points to their proportions. Several figurines match the body changes seen during pregnancy, hinting they might have been used to guide midwives. The mystery deepens when we consider what's missing. Male figurines from this era are vanishingly rare, and when they appear, they're often stylized or incomplete. Does this reflect a society centered on female power, or simply different survival priorities? Without written records, we're left piecing together clues from scattered artifacts and comparative anthropology. What's undeniable is how these figurines defy simple explanations. They're not just art, they're conversations in stone and bone. Each time we think we've pinned down their meaning, another discovery unsettles our assumptions. Maybe that's the point. These objects weren't made to be decoded by future archaeologists. They were made to resonate in the moment, to hold the hopes and fears of people for whom survival was anything but guaranteed. And in that, they succeed wildly. Even now, their silent presence challenges us to reconsider what we think we know about the past and about ourselves. Now let's shift our gaze from those intimate, handheld figurines to something monumental, quite literally. Rising from the plains of southern England, Stonehenge stands as one of humanity's most enduring puzzles. Those towering sarsen stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons, weren't just placed randomly, they were arranged with precision, their arcs and alignments catching the first light of the summer solstice, framing the winter moon, marking celestial rhythms with an accuracy that still takes our breath away. How did a society without wheels, let alone cranes or calculators, achieve this? The logistics alone boggle the mind. The smaller bluestones, each weighing up to 4 tons, were hauled over 150 miles from the Preseli Hills in Wales. Imagine the effort teams dragging these monoliths across rivers, through forests, over hills, using nothing but ropes, sledges, and sheer determination. Some researchers suggest glaciers might have moved some stones closer, but even then, the final positioning was no accident. The sarcens, sourced locally but still colossal, were shaped with stone tools, their surfaces knapped smooth, their lintels locked into place with mortise and tenon joints, a technique later seen in fine carpentry. This wasn't just brute strength, it was engineering brilliance, but the real magic lies in why they did it. Stonehenge wasn't a solitary project. It evolved over centuries, each generation adding layers of meaning. The earliest phase, a circular ditch and bank, dates back around 5,000 years. Later, timber posts gave way to stone, aligning with the solstices in ways that suggest a deep cosmic connection. Some theories paint it as a temple to the sun or a gateway to the ancestors. Others point to the cremated human remains found there, over 60 individuals, their ashes buried in the Aubrey holes surrounding the site. Was this a place of pilgrimage where the living communed with the dead under the watchful eye of the heavens? Then there's the healing hypothesis. Analysis of bones unearthed nearby reveals many belong to people with severe injuries or illnesses. Did they journey here believing the bluestones held curative powers, much like later cultures revered sacred springs? The presence of offerings, animal bones, carved amulets hints at rituals where hope and desperation intertwined. What's most striking, though, is how Stonehenge refuses to fit neatly into any single narrative. It's a celestial clock, a burial ground, a monument to communal effort, a symbol of power, or all of these at once. Unlike the Venus figurines which whisper their secrets, Stonehenge roars ours back at us. It forces us to confront the ingenuity and spiritual depth of people we've often dismissed as primitive. They tracked stars with naked eyes, moved mountains with bare hands, and wove their beliefs into the very bones of the land. And in doing so, they left us a riddle that still pulls at our curiosity, daring us to look beyond the stones and see the minds that dreamed them into being. Buried for over 3,600 years beneath a German hillside, the Nebra Sky Disk waited silently until the turn of the 21st century, when looters stumbled upon it and unwittingly handed us one of archaeology's most breathtaking discoveries. Picture this, a bronze circle no larger than a dinner plate, its surface studded with gold symbols that shimmer against the darkened metal, a crescent moon. A cluster of stars, a radiant sun, or perhaps a full moon flanked by graceful arcs that seem to cradle the heavens. At first glance, it could be an ancient work of art. But look closer. Those stars aren't random. They mirror the Pleiades constellation, a celestial marker known to cultures worldwide. The arcs, they align with the solstices, the turning points of the year that dictated planting and harvest for early farming communities. This isn't just decoration, it's a map of the sky frozen in time. What makes the disk so extraordinary is how it defies simple categorization. Unlike Stonehenge's towering stones or the Venus figurines' intimate symbolism, the Nebra Sky Disk sits at the crossroads of science and sacred belief. On one hand, its precision suggests practical use. The angles between the gold arcs, 82 degrees, match the exact span between sunset positions at winter and summer solstices in central Germany. For a society dependent on agriculture, tracking these seasonal shifts wasn't just helpful, it was survival. A farmer holding this disc could predict when to sow seeds or move livestock, turning celestial patterns into bread and meat. Yet the disc's burial tells another story. Found alongside 2 swords, axes, and bracelets, it wasn't discarded as obsolete. It was hidden with care, placed beside objects of war and status as if to protect or consecrate them. This duality, part calculator, part talisman, reflects a worldview where the practical and the spiritual weren't opposites but intertwined strands of understanding. The same stars that guided planting might also be seen as gods or ancestors watching from above. The disc's gold, likely mined hundreds of miles away in Cornwall, would have been impossibly rare, elevating it beyond mere tool into the realm of the sacred. Then there's the mystery of its evolution. The disc wasn't made in a single moment, it was altered over generations. Originally, it may have featured just the moon and stars. Later, the sun and arcs were added, then the bottom arc, often interpreted as a solar boat, ferrying the sun through the underworld at night, a motif seen in Egyptian and Scandinavian myths. This layering suggests a living object, its meaning shifting as knowledge or beliefs evolved. Imagine it passed from priest to apprentice, each adding their insights, each generation refining humanity's dialogue with the cosmos. What lingers most is the disc's silent challenge to modern assumptions. We often divide history into neat categories, science here, religion there, but the Nebra Sky Disk refuses to fit. It's a reminder that for our ancestors, the sky wasn't just a clock or a calendar. It was a story, a prayer, a mirror reflecting their deepest questions about order and chaos, life and time. And in that shimmering bronze, we catch a glimpse of people not so different from us gazing upward, searching for patterns, and finding, in the stars, both answers and endless wonder. The sheer scale of Göbekli Tepe stops you in your tracks not just because of what's there, but because of when it was built. 12,000 years ago, humanity was supposed to be living in small, nomadic bands, hunting wild game and foraging for berries. Yet here, on a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, hundreds of people came together to carve and erect pillars weighing up to 20 tons, each one etched with leaping foxes, snarling lions, and coiled serpents so vivid they seemed to breathe. This wasn't just art, it was a statement, a declaration that something profound stirred in the human spirit long before cities, kings, or even farming. What's most startling is the timeline. Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture by thousands of years. Conventional wisdom says civilization followed a neat sequence. First, humans domesticated crops, then settled into villages, and then had the leisure to build temples. But this site flips that script entirely. Here, hunter-gatherers, people who supposedly spent every waking hour securing their next meal, were hauling limestone slabs, shaping them with flint tools, and arranging them into circles with eerie precision. Why, if survival was their sole focus, why pour energy into something with no obvious practical use? The answer might lie in the carvings themselves. These aren't random animals, they're predators, creatures of strength, danger, and symbolic power. A pillar might show a vulture hovering over a headless human, a scene some interpret as a funerary rite where bodies were exposed to birds in a sky burial. Others see totems of clan identities or warnings about the wild's perils, but perhaps the most compelling theory is that Göbekli Tepe was a communal magnet, a place where scattered groups gathered seasonally to feast, exchange knowledge, and reinforce social bonds through shared ritual. Archaeologists have found bones from aurochs, gazelles, and deer by the thousands, evidence of massive barbecues that could have fed hundreds. Imagine the scene, fires lighting up the night, stories exchanged over roasted meat, and the pillars looming like silent witnesses to a pact between humans and the unseen forces they sought to appease. Then there's the architecture's strangeness. The site wasn't built to last a lifetime. It was deliberately buried. Every few decades, older circles were filled in with rubble, and new ones constructed atop them. This wasn't neglect, it was intentional, almost like a ritual renewal. Some researchers suggest the buried layers weren't just discarded but sanctified, turning the entire hill into a sacred ladder connecting the living world with the realms below. Göbekli Tepe's greatest gift is the question it leaves us: did religion precede civilization rather than emerge from it? Could it be that the urge to worship, to gather around something greater than oneself, was the spark that eventually led to villages, then cities, then all the complexity we call history? The pillars don't answer, but they stand as silent challengers to our neat narratives, reminding us that humanity's story is far older and far stranger than we ever imagined. Buried beneath the floors of ancient homes in Satalhiruk, nestled in the dust of millennia, lie clues to a world where the walls themselves seem to breathe with life. This sprawling Neolithic city, one of the earliest known settlements, thrived over 9,000 years ago, its mud brick houses packed so tightly that residents moved across rooftops instead of streets. But what's truly astonishing isn't just how they lived, it's what they left behind. Hidden under sleeping platforms or pressed into the clay of their walls, archaeologists have uncovered talismans so vivid they seem to pulse with energy even now. Bulls with curved horns, leopards frozen mid-snarl, even tiny clay figurines of women cradling wild cats. These weren't just decorations, they were guardians. Take the famous bull reliefs, their massive heads protruding from walls as if ready to burst through. These weren't passive images, they were active participants in daily life. Imagine a family gathering by firelight, the flickering shadows making the bull's eyes gleam, its nostrils flare to them. This wasn't mere art. It might have been a conduit, a way to channel the bull's raw strength into their home, offering protection against hunger, illness, or unseen threats. Some bulls were even paired with human hands, a striking blend of species that hints at transformation or kinship. Was this an early glimpse of shape-shifting myths, or a reminder that humans and beasts shared the same life force? Then there are the leopards. Dozens of figurines and paintings show these predators, their spotted pelts meticulously detailed, their bodies coiled with tension. Unlike the bulls, leopards often appear in pairs, flanking doorways or guarding burial platforms. Their repetition suggests a special role, perhaps as guides between worlds, their agility and nocturnal prowess making them ideal escorts for the soul's journey. One haunting mural even shows humans wearing leopard skins, dancing in a line, ritual costumes, symbols of status, or proof that donning an animal's form was a sacred act, a way to borrow its power. But the most intimate talismans are the smallest tiny clay figurines tucked beneath floors or placed in grain bins. Many depict women, their bodies merging with furniture or animals, like the famous seated woman of Satalhiruk, her throne-like chair flanked by feline heads. Some scholars argue these were mother goddess icons, but the truth might be messier. Found alongside tools and food remains, they could have been household spirits, invoked for good harvests or safe births. A child's burial cradling a clay bird, a storage pit holding a boar figurine. These weren't grand temple offerings, they were personal, urgent negotiations with the unseen. What emerges is a society where the sacred wasn't confined to shrines but woven into the fabric of daily survival. A farmer planting seeds might pause to touch a bull relief, praying for fertile soil. A mother might slip a clay figure under her child's sleeping mat, whispering protection into the dark. Satalhiruk's genius lies in this seamlessness. Their art wasn't separate from life. It was life, a dialogue with forces they couldn't control but desperately needed to court. And in that dialogue, we see the birth of something profound, the human impulse to make meaning, to carve order from chaos, one talisman at a time. Stretching across the Breton countryside like a vast, silent army, the Karnak stones defy explanation. Over 3,000 megaliths stand in eerie, precise rows, some towering twice the height of a person, others worn low by millennia of wind and rain. Unlike Stonehenge's dramatic circle or Göbekli Tepe's carved pillars, Karnak stones whisper their mystery in repetition, row after row, line after line, marching across the landscape with a purpose we can only guess at. Local legend claims their Roman soldiers turned to stone by a sorcerer, but the truth is far older. These stones were planted here over 6,000 years ago, long before Rome existed, by people who left no written clues behind. What's striking isn't just their number, but their arrangement. The stones aren't scattered randomly. They're grouped into three major alignments: Meinec, Comario, and Kaleskan, each with hundreds of menhirs placed at intervals that seem almost rhythmic. Some researchers argue their spacing mirrors celestial patterns, like a giant calendar tracking the moon's phases or solstice sunrises. Imagine standing at the head of the Meinec alignment at dawn, watching the first light slide between the stones like a key turning in a lock. Could these have been observatories where priest astronomers decoded the heavens? Others propose a more earthly function: territorial markers, dividing land between clans in a society where ownership was as much about ritual as resources. Then there's the funeral connection. Many stones sit near burial mounds, their surfaces sometimes carved with cryptic symbols: serpents, axes, or zigzags that might represent water or passage. One theory suggests they were part of a path of the dead, guiding spirits toward ancestral resting places. In this view, each stone isn't just a marker but a participant, a silent witness to processions where the living carried their dead into the afterlife, their footsteps echoing against the menhirs. But perhaps the most humbling aspect is the sheer labor involved. Moving these stones, some weighing over 300 tons, required not just muscle but coordination. Unlike later monuments built by centralized kingdoms, Karnak likely emerged from a patchwork of communities working in concert. Think of the logistics: quarrying granite without metal tools, transporting slabs miles across uneven terrain, aligning them with nothing but ropes and wooden sledges. This wasn't the work of a few seasons, it was generational, a project stretching lifetimes. What compelled them? Shared belief, competition, a need to leave something enduring in a world where everything else, homes, tools, even bodies, crumbled to dust. The Karnak stones resist neat answers. They might have been all these things: calendar, cemetery, boundary line, or none of them. What lingers is their quiet power. Unlike the grand tombs of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, Karnak has no gold, no inscriptions, no obvious kings or gods, just stones and earth and sky. And yet, standing among them, you feel the weight of intention, the certainty that every one of these monoliths was placed just so, for reasons that mattered desperately to someone. That's the heart of the mystery, not what they were for, but what they meant to the hands that raised them, and why that meaning was worth centuries of effort. Deep in the frozen earth of Siberia, where winter winds howl like unseen spirits, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that seem to pulse with otherworldly energy. These aren't just tools or ornaments, they're portals. A drum stretched with reindeer hide, its surface painted with swirling red ochre symbols. A mask carved from birch bark, its hollow eyes staring into realms beyond our own. A necklace of bare teeth and bird bones, each piece carefully chosen, as if the wearer believed they carried the essence of the animals themselves. These are the relics of shamans, the ancient mediators between the human world and the unseen forces that surrounded them. What makes these objects so mesmerizing is how they blur the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary. Take the drums, for instance. Found in burial mounds across Siberia, their designs are anything but random. Some bear maps of the cosmos, a central axis representing the world tree, its branches reaching into upper realms, its roots plunging into the underworld. Others show spirit animals like elk or eagles, creatures believed to carry shamans on their journeys. When struck, the drum's rhythm wasn't just music, it was a vehicle. Ethnographic records from later Siberian tribes describe shamans using the steady beat to enter trances, their souls riding the sound into realms where they could bargain for healing, wisdom, or lost souls. Then there are the masks. Unlike the realistic portraiture of later cultures, these are abstract, almost surreal. Some merge human and animal features, a face with a beak, or eyes that slant like a wolf's. Others are painted with geometric patterns that mirror the hallucinations induced by ritual plants or prolonged isolation in the bitter cold. These weren't costumes, they were transformations. To wear one was to become something else, a bridge between species, a conduit for voices older than humanity. The amulets tell another layer of the story. Bear claws, wolf teeth, even tiny carvings of fish or owls, all were worn or carried as protective charms, but their power went deeper than superstition. In shamanic belief, every animal held unique medicine. A bear's tooth might grant strength, an owl's feather sharpen night vision, a salmon's bone ensure abundance. These weren't metaphors, they were literal exchanges of energy, a way to harness the wild's essence for survival in a harsh world. What's astonishing is how far this tradition spread. From the Ural Mountains to the Mongolian steppes, similar artifacts appear across thousands of miles and years. A drum fragment in Finland mirrors one in Kazakhstan. A mask from Altai echoes designs found in Norway. This wasn't coincidence, it was a shared spiritual language, one that predated religions with temples and scriptures. Shamans were humanity's first theologians, their rituals a response to universal questions. Why do we suffer? Where do we go when we die? How do we appease the forces that control storms, sickness, and the seasons? The legacy of these practices lingers, not just in museums but in the threads of modern spirituality. The shaman's journey, the descent into darkness to retrieve wisdom, the use of rhythm to alter consciousness finds echoes in meditation, psychotherapy, even music therapy. These ancient artifacts remind us that the human search for meaning didn't begin with organized religion. It began in the quiet of a firelit tent, with a drum's heartbeat, a mask's gaze, and the unshakable belief that the world is far stranger and far more alive than it seems. In the quiet glow of a Shang dynasty temple, a diviner presses a hot bronze rod into the polished surface of an ox shoulder blade. The bone creaks, then splits with a sharp crack, a sound believed to carry voices from the spirit world. As smoke curls upward, the diviner leans closer, tracing the jagged lines with a fingertip. To modern eyes, it might look like random damage, but to them, this was a conversation. The cracks formed answers to urgent questions. Will the harvest succeed? Is the king's illness an omen? Should we go to war? And here's the astonishing part. Those questions, along with the spirit's replies, were often carved directly into the bone itself. These oracle bones aren't just relics of superstition. They're the birth certificate of Chinese civilization, where sacred ritual and written language collided in a single, shimmering moment. The sheer variety of questions preserved on these bones opens a window into a world where the divine was deeply practical. Some inscriptions fret over royal toothaches or childbirth. Others document celestial events. On the seventh day, a great new star appeared beside Antares, making them some of humanity's earliest astronomical records. One bone even records a lunar eclipse so accurately that modern astronomers can date it precisely to December 27th, 1192 B. CE, this duality is what makes them extraordinary. They weren't just mystical tools, they were logbooks blending prayers with proto-science. Imagine a scribe notching the outcome of a divination about floodwaters, then checking weeks later to see if the prediction held true. Over generations, these records became a kind of data, refining both spiritual and practical knowledge. The artistry of the inscriptions themselves is another marvel. Early symbols were pictographs, a horse drawn with sweeping strokes for its mane, a river rendered as undulating lines. But as diviners standardized their craft, these evolved into the angular characters recognizable as ancestors of modern Chinese writing. The very act of carving was sacred. Mistakes were filled with lacquer or lead, as if correcting the bone might offend the spirits. Some high-status bones were even polished to a sheen, their edges inlaid with turquoise, transforming them from ritual objects into treasures. What's heartbreaking is how close we came to losing them. For centuries, farmers plowing fields near Anyang unearthed these bones, selling them as dragon bones to be ground into traditional medicine. It wasn't until 1899 that a scholar recognized the scratches as ancient writing. Since then, over 200,000 fragments have been recovered, each one a puzzle piece reconstructing the Shang dynasty's worldview. They reveal a society where kings ruled as intermediaries between heaven and earth, where every drought or victory was seen as dialogue with ancestors. But perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in their imperfections. Not all predictions came true. Some bones show multiple divinations for the same question, as if hoping for a better answer. Others bear notations like "the rain did not come," admitting the spirit's silence. In these moments, the oracle bones feel achingly human, not proof of certainty, but artifacts of hope. They remind us that writing itself may have begun not just to record laws or trade, but to grasp at the whispers of the unseen, to fix fleeting moments of connection with the divine into something tangible. And in doing so, they bridge the deepest of human desires to be heard even by the gods. Emerging from the labyrinthine ruins of Knossos and other Minoan palaces, the snake goddess figurines captivate with their quiet power. Picture one in your hands, a ceramic woman standing tall, her elaborate tiered skirt flaring outward, her arms outstretched as twin serpents coil around her wrists like living bracelets. Her bare breasts and cinched waist speak of fertility, while her piercing eyes seem to hold secrets from a world where women weren't just worshippers but conduits of the divine. Unlike the Venus figurines of earlier eras, these weren't abstract symbols. They were portraits of a sacred presence, crafted with such individuality that some scholars argue they depict real priestesses channeling the goddess herself. The snakes are the key to unraveling their meaning. In many ancient cultures, serpents symbolized cyclical renewal, shedding their skin as nature shed seasons. But for the Minoans, their significance may have run deeper. Frescoes show snakes winding through altars and resting in the hands of female figures as if they were familiars. One theory suggests they represented household guardians, their venomous potential tamed by the goddess's power. Imagine these figurines placed in palace shrines, their serpentine attendants warding off evil while ensuring the land's fertility. Another interpretation links them to the underworld, the snake's sinuous movements mirroring the labyrinth's twisting paths, a metaphor for life, death, and rebirth. What's striking is how these objects reflect a society where the sacred feminine wasn't marginalized but central. Minoan art overflows with images of women in roles of authority, leading ceremonies, dancing with bulls, or presiding over rituals. The snake goddess figurines often stand atop altars or hold their serpents aloft like scepters, their poses exuding command rather than submission. Even their fashion tells a story. The flounced skirts and open bodices weren't just style, they echoed the natural world, the rippling layers resembling terraced fields, the exposed breasts echoing the nourishing earth. This wasn't eroticism, it was theology in clay, a celebration of femininity as the source of life itself. The craftsmanship reveals another layer of devotion. Some figurines were made of delicate faience, a glazed ceramic requiring kiln temperatures so precise that failures were common. Others bore traces of gold leaf, their once gleaming surfaces meant to catch the flicker of oil lamps during nocturnal rites. The attention to detail, the careful scoring of snake scales, the individualized facial features suggests these weren't mass-produced idols but sacred vessels, each one unique. Yet the greatest mystery lies in their silence. Unlike Egyptian gods with their hieroglyphic hymns or Mesopotamian deities with their cuneiform prayers, the Minoans left no decipherable texts. We don't know the goddess's name or the chants that once filled her temples. All we have are these figurines, their serpents frozen in an eternal dance, their makers long vanished into myth. And perhaps that's fitting. They remind us that some truths resist translation, that the divine feminine, in all its power and paradox, was never meant to be pinned down with words, only witnessed, honored, and felt. Buried in a peat bog on the island of Zealand, the Trundholm Sun chariot gleamed beneath the earth for over 3,000 years, until the day a farmer's plow struck bronze instead of soil. What emerged was no ordinary relic. Before them lay a miniature masterpiece, a horse, its mane etched with delicate grooves, pulling a radiant golden disc mounted on 6 spoked wheels. The disc's surface shimmered with concentric circles, one side gilded to brilliance, the other left dark. At first glance, it might resemble a child's toy. But this was no plaything. It was a cosmic map, a Bronze Age answer to humanity's oldest question. How does the sun rise each morning, and where does it go when night falls? The chariot's duality holds the key, that gleaming golden side. It's the sun at noon, blazing across the summer sky. The darkened reverse, the sun's nocturnal journey through the underworld, traveling unseen until dawn restores its light. This wasn't just symbolism, it was sacred mechanics. The wheels allowed the disc to be turned, mirroring the sun's daily cycle. Imagine a priest or shaman rotating it during solstice rites, enacting the celestial drama to ensure the sun's rebirth. For agricultural societies clinging to Denmark's harsh latitudes, where winter darkness stretched endlessly, this ritual wasn't poetry, it was survival. If the sun failed to return, crops withered, livestock starved, and life itself hung in the balance. What's haunting is how personal the chariot feels. The horse, its posture tense with motion, wasn't generic. Its slender legs and arched neck match breeds depicted in Scandinavian rock carvings, suggesting a real animal known to its makers. The disc's spiral patterns echo those found on contemporary razors and weapons, a shared visual language linking daily tools to the cosmos. Even its size matters. Small enough to hold in 2 hands, it was likely carried in processions, perhaps placed on altars beside offerings of grain or amber. This wasn't a distant god in a temple, it was a deity you could lift, turn, and beg for mercy. Comparative mythology deepens the mystery. The concept of a sun chariot traversing the sky appears across cultures, from Greece's Helios to India's Surya. But the Trundholm model predates most written accounts by centuries, hinting at an ancient, perhaps even Indo-European, root to the myth. Later Norse legends would describe the sun chased by wolves, or Odin riding his 8-legged steed across the heavens. Was this chariot their prototype, a physical echo of stories not yet written down? The unanswered questions linger. Who held it last before it was laid in the bog? Was it a votive offering buried to secure divine favor, or a sacred object hidden from invaders? We may never know, but the Trundholm Sun chariot endures as a testament to humanity's relentless urge to explain the unexplainable, to take the vast, impersonal forces of nature and shape them into something intimate, something knowable. In its spinning disk, we see the birth of astronomy, theology, and art, all fused into a single, radiant object no larger than a harvest basket. And in that fusion, we recognize ourselves still gazing at the sky, still weaving stories to bridge the gap between earth and heaven. Buried beneath the Romanian earth for over 7,000 years, the Tărtăria tablets emerged as silent rebels against history's accepted timeline. 3 small clay fragments, no larger than a palm, etched with symbols that whisper of a possibility almost too radical to consider. What if writing didn't begin in the bustling city-states of Mesopotamia, but in the quiet valleys of prehistoric Europe? The markings, a mix of angular lines, spirals, and animal-like figures, bear no obvious resemblance to later cuneiform or hieroglyphs. Yet their deliberate arrangement, clustered in rows like sentences, hints at something beyond decoration. Could these be the remnants of a lost language, a sacred code meant to bridge the human and the divine? The debate hinges on 2 tantalizing clues. First, the tablet's age. Carbon dated to around 5300 BCE, they predate the earliest known Mesopotamian writing by nearly 2 millennia. If these symbols convey meaning, they append the conventional narrative that literacy bloomed alongside urban bureaucracy. Second, their context, found nestled beside a fire altar in a Neolithic settlement, alongside clay figurines and charred bones, the tablets weren't discarded casually. They were placed intentionally, perhaps as offerings or ritual objects. One theory suggests they served as ceremonial menus for sacrifices, their symbols listing which animals or goods were devoted to the gods. Another proposes they were early prayer tablets, their etchings preserving invocations too potent to trust solely to memory. But the most provocative interpretation comes from their resemblance to later Vinci symbols, a set of recurring signs found across southeastern Europe. Some scholars argue these markings represent a proto-writing system, a step between abstract art and full literacy. Imagine a shaman tracing these symbols during rites, their forms encoding secret knowledge passed down through generations. Unlike administrative cuneiform, born from tracking grain taxes, the Tărtăria tablets might have emerged from spiritual need, a desire to fix the ephemeral, to make prayers tangible. Yet skepticism lingers. Without a Rosetta Stone to decipher them, the tablet symbols remain mute. Could they be potter's marks, clan insignia, or even an elaborate hoax? The truth may lie in between. Early writing systems rarely emerge fully formed. They evolve from countless iterations of trial and meaning. The Tărtăria tablets could capture that pivotal moment when marks ceased to be mere pictures and began to carry ideas, a transition as profound as the first spark of fire. What's undeniable is their power to unsettle. They force us to reconsider not just where writing began, but why. If literacy's roots stretch deeper into prehistory, intertwined with ritual rather than commerce, it reshapes our understanding of human ingenuity. Perhaps the urge to record wasn't born from ledgers but from longing, a Neolithic hand pressing symbols into clay, desperate to make the unseen seen and to echo across time. Imagine a storm-tossed ship sinking off the coast of Antichithera around 60 BCE, its cargo spilling into the dark, statues, coins, jewelry, and one unassuming lump of corroded bronze. For 2,000 years, it lay buried under layers of sea and time until divers stumbled upon it in 1901. At first glance, it seemed just another artifact. Then someone noticed the gears. The Antichithera Mechanism, as it came to be called, wasn't just ahead of its time. It defied time entirely. This intricate device, no larger than a shoebox, contained over 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely calibrated to model the cosmos. Turn its hand crank and dials would spin, tracking the moon's phases, predicting eclipses, even charting the irregular motions of planets. It wasn't just a tool, it was a miniature universe in metal, a celestial calculator crafted centuries before similar devices reappeared in medieval Europe. What's staggering isn't just its complexity but its context. This wasn't the product of Renaissance workshops or Alexandrian scholars at their peak. It was made in the 2nd century BCE, a period we often picture through marble statues and scrolls, not precision engineering. The mechanism's differential gears, a technology once thought invented in the 1600s, reveal a mastery of mechanics that shouldn't have existed. How did its creators achieve such sophistication without blueprints, without even the concept of a machine as we know it? The answer might lie in its purpose. While the mechanism's gears whisper of science, its functions sing of the sacred. Its dials didn't just track time, they marked the dates of Olympic Games and religious festivals, aligning human rituals with celestial rhythms. One theory suggests it was used to determine auspicious moments for planting or sacrifices, blending astronomy with divinity. This wasn't a cold, clinical device. It was a bridge between earth and sky, a way to sync mortal lives with the god's grand design. Yet the most haunting question isn't how it worked, but where its knowledge came from. The mechanism's design implies generations of trial and error, a lineage of lost devices that preceded it. Did earlier civilizations, now forgotten, lay the groundwork for its gears? Could its roots stretch back to prehistoric star watchers who first noticed patterns in the night? The wreck itself offers clues: bronze statues from Rhodes, coins from Pergamon hinting at a Mediterranean network where ideas flowed as freely as trade goods. Today, the Antichithera Mechanism sits in a museum in Athens, its fragments painstakingly scanned and reconstructed, but its true legacy isn't in glass cases. It's in the realization that history isn't a straight line from primitive to advanced. Sometimes brilliance flares in unexpected eras, then flickers out, leaving only whispers. And sometimes, if we're lucky, the sea gives one back. On the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, where towering stone moai stare blankly across the Pacific, another mystery hides in plain sight, not in stone but in wood. The Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island bear rows of intricate glyphs that look almost like writing turned inside out, their symbols resembling fishhooks, frigate birds, and crouching human figures frozen mid-dance. Discovered in the 19th century, these carved wooden tablets contain the only known indigenous writing system to emerge in Oceania, a linguistic island as remote as the land that birthed it. What's astonishing isn't just that Rongorongo exists, but that it flourished in a society with no known contact with literate cultures. This wasn't borrowed script, it was something homegrown, a sacred codex whispering across centuries from a world without paper, without metal tools, without anything but the patience to carve truth into wood. The glyphs themselves are a study in contradiction. Some appear pictographic, a waving hand, a crescent moon, while others twist into abstractions that defy easy reading. What's undeniable is their intentionality. The symbols aren't random, they're organized in alternating lines, a system called reverse boustrophedon, where the text zigzags like a plow turning soil. One line reads left to right, the next right to left. The symbols themselves flip to face the new direction. This complexity suggests more than simple record-keeping. Imagine a priest or elder tracing these lines during ceremonies, the very act of reading becoming ritual, the words alive with mana. the Polynesian concept of spiritual power. Theories about Rongorongo's purpose span from the practical to the profound. Some argue it recorded genealogies, preserving the lineage of chiefs in a society where ancestry was divine currency. Others see it as a liturgical calendar, marking sacred dates tied to the island's birdman cult or harvest cycles. A handful of glyphs resemble plants and animals extinct by the time Europeans arrived, hinting that the tablets might encode ecological memory, a warning or lament carved in wood. But here's the wrench in every theory. Not a single Rongorongo text has been definitively deciphered. The last fluent readers died in the 19th century, victims of slavery and disease, taking the script's secrets with them. What makes Rongorongo so tantalizing is its isolation. Most writing systems spread through trade or conquest cuneiform influencing hieroglyphs, Phoenician script birthing Greek. But Easter Island was a world unto itself. The nearest continental shore lay 2,300 miles away. If Rongorongo truly developed independently, it would be one of the few times in human history that writing was invented, not inherited. This raises staggering questions. Did the island's priests create it to communicate with gods rather than people? Was it a response to some crisis, a way to fix vanishing knowledge as deforestation and war fractured their society? The tablet's survival is its own miracle. Most were burned as pagan curios or repurposed as fishing reels by missionaries. Only 26 survive, scattered in museums from Berlin to Santiago. Modern efforts to decode them using computational linguistics have yielded flashes of insight, a possible lunar calendar here, a chant fragment there, but no Rosetta Stone moment. Yet the very elusiveness of Rongorongo speaks volumes. In a civilization known for its colossal stone heads, these unassuming wooden tablets may be the truest monuments, not to power, but to the human need to speak across time, to carve meaning into the void before the lights go out. Deep in the damp darkness of France's Lascaux caves, the flicker of an ancient torch would have revealed something extraordinary, walls alive with motion. A herd of aurochs gallops across the stone, their hooves forever suspended mid-stride. A stag lifts its head, antlers branching like a crown. A woolly rhinoceros, rare in prehistoric art, stands frozen in profile, its hide textured with meticulous strokes. These aren't just images, they're portals. Painted over 17,000 years ago, the Lascaux murals pulse with a sacred energy that transcends mere decoration. Every curve of the cave, every bulge in the rock, was harnessed to give these animals depth. A bison's shoulder swelling where the stone naturally protrudes, a horse's belly rounding with the contour of the wall. This wasn't art for art's sake. It was art as alchemy, transforming cold limestone into a living bestiary. What's striking isn't just the skill, but the setting. Lascaux isn't a shallow shelter where families might camp. It's a labyrinth. To reach the chamber of the bulls, painters would have navigated narrow passages and vertical shafts, their way lit only by animal fat lamps. This wasn't a casual workspace. It was a chosen sanctum, a place set apart. The effort to create here grinding minerals into pigment, scaffolding to reach high ceilings, working in stifling darkness suggests these images weren't meant for daily viewing. They were hidden, almost secret. Some chambers are so cramped, only 1 or 2 people could have painted at a time, their work illuminated by flickering light that made the animals seem to breathe. Was this intimacy part of the ritual, a solitary artist channeling visions, or an initiate enduring trials to earn the right to witness sacred knowledge? The subjects themselves hint at deeper layers. While animals dominate, humans appear rarely, and when they do, they're strange. One figure sprawls beside a bison, bird-headed and possibly lifeless, while a woolly mammoth sketched nearby ignores the scene entirely. Nearby, geometric shapes, dots, grids, nested curves, cluster like coded messages. Some researchers see hunting magic here, the paintings acting as sympathetic spells to ensure successful hunts. Others propose initiation rites, where youths entered the cave's womb-like depths to metaphorically die and rebirth as adults. The Wounded Man panel, with its speared bison and prone figure, might depict a mythic ancestor's death, a story passed down through generations. Then there's the mystery of repetition. Certain walls were painted over and over, new animals layered atop older ones. Was this a ceremonial renewal like Göbekli Tepe's buried pillars? Or did each artist add to the wall as part of their own spiritual journey? The pigments tell another tale. Ochres from distant sources, manganese dioxide traded across miles. This wasn't a local project, it was a pilgrimage. Lascaux's greatest lesson might be its refusal to fit modern categories. These paintings weren't art separated from religion or science. They were all three at once: a celestial map marking seasonal migrations, a devotional act honoring the animals that sustained life, and a masterclass in observation, where every muscle and sinew was rendered with anatomical precision. To stand before them now is to stand at the birth of human imagination, the moment we began to shape the unseen into something we could touch, and in touching, understand. Imagine standing in a sunlit field 3,000 years ago, watching a figure approach, tall, gleaming, their head crowned with a cone of pure gold etched with celestial patterns that catch the light like constellations brought to earth. This wasn't a king or warrior. This was something far more mysterious, a keeper of time, a reader of the heavens, wearing what we now call the Berlin gold hat. One of only 4 such artifacts ever discovered, these Bronze Age marvels aren't just ornate headpieces. They're wearable observatories, their surfaces dense with precise astronomical markings that could predict eclipses, solstices, and planting seasons with uncanny accuracy. The craftsmanship alone is staggering. Made from paper, thin sheets of gold hammered together without seams, each hat towers over a foot tall, tapering to a delicate point. But it's the symbols that mesmerize: row after row of concentric circles, spirals, and starbursts arranged in mathematical sequences. Researchers studying the Berlin hat made a stunning realization: the rows aren't random. They encode the Metonic cycle, a 19-year pattern reconciling lunar and solar calendars. One theory suggests shamans wore these during rituals, turning the hats to align symbols with celestial events, effectively using them as analog computers to mark sacred dates. Picture a ceremony where the wearer, backlit by fire, adjusts the hat's position until its engravings mirror the moon's phase, signaling the community when to sow seeds or conduct rites. Their distribution hints at a shared spiritual language. Found scattered from Germany to France, each hat shares design elements but differs in detail like regional dialects of the same cosmic vocabulary. The Ezzelsdorf Butch hat, discovered near Nuremberg, bears tighter spiral clusters, possibly tracking shorter lunar cycles. The Schifferstadt hat, unearthed in a field with its base deliberately buried in clay, might have been a votive offering to the gods of the soil and sky. The rarity of these objects suggests they weren't personal adornments but communal treasures, passed down through generations of astronomer priests who guarded their secrets as closely as the gold itself. What's haunting is how abruptly their tradition ends. No later cultures in Europe produced anything like them. Were the gold hats makers wiped out by invasion or famine? Did their knowledge fade into myth, leaving only these golden shells behind? Or did the hats themselves become too dangerous objects of power that new rulers destroyed to sever ties with the old ways? The silence of the artifacts is deafening. They offer no inscriptions, no buried manuscripts to explain their use. Only the precision of their engravings whispers of a lost science, where metal and myth fuse to harness time itself. Yet their legacy lingers in unexpected places. The conical shape echoes the pointed headdresses of later Celtic druids, and even the witch hats of European folklore, symbols of liminal beings who bridged worlds. Maybe that's the deepest truth these gold hats reveal. They weren't just tools or status symbols, they were transformations. To wear one was to become something more than human, a living conduit between earth and sky, tasked with reading the divine script written in the stars. And in that sacred role, they remind us how far we've come and how much we've forgotten in our journey to measure the heavens. Deep in the steamy jungles of Mexico's Gulf Coast, the Olmec colossal heads stare out from the past with an almost unsettling presence. Carved from single blocks of basalt, some weighing as much as 40 tons, these monumental faces bear expressions that range from serene to stern, their lips slightly parted as if frozen mid-utterance. Each one is distinct, with unique headdresses, ear ornaments, and even subtle variations in facial structure, as though they were portraits of real individuals. But who were these figures? Kings who demanded deification, gods immortalized in stone, or perhaps ancestors watching over the living? The mystery only deepens when you consider the sheer audacity of their creation, a feat that would challenge modern engineers, let alone a civilization without metal tools or wheels. The logistical hurdles alone boggle the mind. The basalt used for these heads wasn't local. It was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, miles away from Olmec centers like La Venta and San Lorenzo. Transporting these monoliths would have required hundreds of laborers, likely using a combination of ropes, sledges, and rafts along rivers, an effort that must have taken weeks, if not months. Then came the carving. Using nothing but stone tools, Olmec artisans transformed these rugged boulders into lifelike visages, their chisels revealing cheekbones, nostrils, and even the subtle creases of a furrowed brow. The precision is staggering, especially when you consider the scale. One unfinished head, still lodged in its quarry, shows the initial stages of this process, a ghostly face emerging from the rock, as if the stone itself were confessing its true form. Then there's the question of purpose. Unlike later Mesoamerican monuments, which often depict gods or mythic scenes, these heads feel intensely personal. Some theories suggest they represent revered rulers, their features carved to ensure their presence endured beyond death. Others argue they're warrior heroes, commemorating battles or conquests. The most tantalizing idea ties them to the Olmec belief in the word jaguar, a supernatural blend of human and big cat often seen in their art. Could these heads depict shamans or deities capable of shapeshifting, their stern gazes meant to ward off evil? The answer might lie in their placement. At La Venta, the heads were arranged in a line facing outward, like sentinels guarding a sacred space. Were they protectors of the city, or markers of a spiritual boundary between the mundane and the divine? What's undeniable is how these heads blur the line between power and piety. In many prehistoric societies, rulers derived their authority from their connection to the gods. Think of Egyptian pharaohs or Mesopotamian priest kings. The Olmec heads might be early evidence of this fusion. Their sheer size and permanence would have awed anyone who saw them, reinforcing the idea that leadership wasn't just political but cosmic. Imagine a farmer toiling in the fields, glancing up at these stone giants looming over the plaza, a daily reminder that their rulers or the gods they embodied were always watching. Yet the heads also whisper of a deeper, more universal human impulse. Whether they're portraits or symbols, their creators went to extraordinary lengths to make them endure. In a world where flesh decayed and memories faded, stone promised immortality. That urge to leave a mark, to be remembered, to shout across the centuries is something we still understand. The Olmec heads don't just represent kings or gods. They're a testament to the timeless desire to be seen, to matter, to outlast the relentless march of time. And in that, they speak not just for the Olmec, but for all of us. Rising like sentinels from the mist-shrouded forests of the Pacific Northwest, the totem poles of indigenous cultures stand as vibrant counterpoints to the ancient stone monoliths of Europe. While newer in comparison, most dating from the 18th century onward, their roots stretch deep into prehistory, tapping into that same universal human urge to carve meaning from the natural world. Each pole is a forest transformed, towering cedar trunks reshaped into bears with outstretched claws, eagles with wings poised for flight, or mythical thunderbirds whose eyes seem to flash with storm light. But these aren't mere decorations, they're layered narratives, their figures stacked like chapters in a book only the initiated could fully read. The act of creation was itself a sacred covenant. Master carvers, often inheriting their role through generations, would commune with the tree before a single cut was made, offering prayers to acknowledge the spirit within the cedar. The carving process mirrored this reverence, adzes and chisels moving in rhythm with songs, their strokes guided by dreams or visions. When a pole was raised, the entire community participated in a potlatch ceremony, a days-long feast where stories were sung, dances performed, and the pole's meanings unveiled. Imagine the scene, the scent of smoked salmon mingling with cedar sap as the pole, hauled upright with ropes, finally caught the sunlight, its colors ochre, black, and the rare blue-green from crushed copper, blazing to life. This wasn't just construction, it was birth. What's often overlooked is how these poles functioned as both sacred objects and social contracts. A single pole might declare a clan's ancestry through heraldic crests, commemorate a leader's deeds, or even serve as a playful rebuke to rivals through clever symbolism. The famous shame pole of the Tlingit people, for instance, depicted a white trader with a prominent nose, a pointed commentary on his stinginess. Others marked graves, their hollow chambers holding the remains of the honored dead, merging the roles of tombstone and guardian. The figures weren't worshipped as gods but respected as kin embodiments of clan totems like Raven the trickster or Killer, Whale the protector, whose stories encoded moral lessons and ecological wisdom. The poles also whisper of resilience. During the 19th century, missionaries and colonizers destroyed hundreds, denouncing them as pagan idols. Yet the tradition never fully vanished. Today, indigenous carvers are resurrecting the art, blending ancestral techniques with contemporary themes. A modern pole might honor missing indigenous women or celebrate revived languages, proving these icons aren't relics but living vessels of memory. In their grooves and curves, we see the same impulses that drove the builders of Stonehenge or the painters of Lascaux. The need to etch identity into the world, to say, "We were here, we are here," in a voice that outlasts the centuries. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson they offer. Sacred objects don't belong to the past. They're mirrors reflecting back the timeless human hunger to be seen, remembered, and woven into the story of what comes next. When Heinrich Schliemann unearthed the golden mask in 1876, his hands trembled with the certainty that he'd found Agamemnon himself. Pressed against the face of a long-dead Mycenaean noble, the mask's hammered gold caught the Mediterranean sun, its features frozen in an enigmatic half-smile that seemed to bridge myth and history. Schliemann famously telegrammed a king's declaration, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon, but time, ever the revisionist, would tell a different story." Radiocarbon dating eventually placed the mask 3 centuries older than the Trojan War, a relic not of Homer's vengeful monarch, but of an earlier, unnamed ruler whose name vanished into the Bronze Age dark. Yet somehow, this revelation only deepens the artifact's power. Stripped of its mistaken identity, the mask becomes something more universal, a testament to how prehistoric elites wielded sacred objects to blur the lines between mortal and divine. The craftsmanship alone speaks volumes. Unlike later Greek art chasing realism, this mask is unapologetically stylized, the arched eyebrows too perfect, the beard a series of precise curls, the lips pressed into a serene neutrality that feels less like portraiture and more like idealization. This wasn't meant to capture a man's likeness, it was meant to transform him. Gold, rare and untarnishing, symbolized eternity in cultures from Egypt to Peru. By sheathing a ruler's face in it, the Mycenaeans weren't just honoring the dead, they were armoring them for whatever lay beyond, declaring their right to walk among gods or heroes. The mask's thinness hints at its fragility. This was no battle helm but a ceremonial shell, likely molded directly over the deceased's features during funeral rites. Imagine the scene, mourners watching as gold adhered to cooling skin, a final, gilded skin between the king and oblivion. What's haunting is how few such masks survive. Only a handful have been found in Mycenae's shaft graves, suggesting they were reserved for the uppermost echelon, perhaps those claiming descent from Zeus himself. The mask's discovery alongside daggers inlaid with lapis lazuli and cups of silver and gold paints a picture of a society obsessed with hierarchy, where status didn't end at death but demanded display. Later Greek heroes like Achilles might have been buried in simple mounds, but these earlier lords insisted on splendor, their tombs stocked with treasures meant to telegraph power even in the underworld. Yet the mask's true genius lies in its duality. For modern viewers, it's a masterpiece of ancient art. For its makers, it was likely a sacred technology, a vessel to preserve the ruler's eidolon or spirit image, ensuring his identity wouldn't dissolve in the afterlife. The slightly parted lips, a detail often overlooked, might have been intentional, allowing the deceased to breathe, speak, or drink in the next world. In this light, the mask isn't just a status symbol, it's a metaphysical tool as vital as any weapon or crown. And so the mask of Agamemnon endures, not because it belonged to Homer's king, but because it belongs to all of us. It's a mirror held up to humanity's oldest obsession, the hunger to be remembered, to cheat time, to wear immortality like a second skin. Whether it crowned a warrior or a priest-king hardly matters now. What lingers is the face itself, golden, silent, and utterly unconquered by the centuries. Unearthed in 1908 amid the ruins of Crete's Phaistos Palace, the Phaistos Disc is the ultimate ancient cipher, a clay enigma no larger than a dinner plate, yet dense with 45 unique symbols spiraling inward like a hypnotic whirlpool. Unlike the Rosetta Stone or linear bead tablets, which gave up their secrets through bilingual inscriptions or linguistic kinship, this disc stands alone. No duplicate has ever been found, no parallel text uncovered to act as a key. Its symbols stamped rather than carved, each one pressed into the clay with a punch, range from the eerily familiar, a helmeted head, a fish, a beehive, to the utterly cryptic, a plumed arrow, a tattooed face, something resembling a flying saucer. This isn't just writing, it's a locked door with no visible hinges. What's tantalizing is how deliberate the disc feels. The spiral isn't haphazard. It's divided into sections by incised lines, grouping symbols into what might be words or phrases. Some signs repeat in patterns that hint at grammatical structure, perhaps prefixes or suffixes, while others appear only once, like proper nouns or sacred terms. The symmetry is uncanny, 61 words on side A, 59 on side B, as if the text were a hymn or invocation meant to be balanced like scales. One theory suggests it's a prayer wheel, its spiral mirroring the labyrinthine paths of Minoan ritual, Turn it in your hands, and the symbols seem to move, their sequence a meditative chant frozen in clay. Then there's the puzzle of its creation. The punched symbols imply something revolutionary, movable type millennia before Gutenberg. Each sign was made by pressing a pre-formed seal into the clay, a technique unseen elsewhere in Bronze Age Crete. Was this a royal decree mass-produced for distribution? A sacred text stamped to ensure no scribble errors corrupted its power, or perhaps a one-off experiment, a scribe's fleeting attempt to innovate before the method vanished into history. The absence of any other stamped artifacts suggests the latter, making the disc not just a linguistic mystery but a technological ghost, a glimpse of a road not taken. Interpretations veer from the pragmatic to the poetic. Some scholars hear the clatter of a board game in its symbols, the spiral representing a playing track where tokens advanced according to stamped instructions. Others see an agricultural calendar, its pictographs marking planting phases or festival dates. The religious camp argues the disc encodes a hymn to the Minoan Snake Goddess, its symbols echoing motifs found on altars and frescoes. But the boldest theory comes from those who claim it's not writing at all, but a mnemonic device, a memory aid for oral storytellers, each symbol triggering a stanza of epic poetry now lost to time. The disc's isolation gnaws at researchers. Found in a palace annex alongside linear tablets, it shares no symbols with Crete's other scripts. Stylistic links to Anatolian or Egyptian hieroglyphs are faint at best. This isn't just an undeciphered text, it's a linguistic island, a code without a key. Even its date is contested, while typically placed around 1700 CE. Some argue its context suggests a later deposit, leaving open the chilling possibility that it's a relic of a lost culture even older than the Minoans. What lingers isn't just frustration, but awe. The Phaistos Disc refuses to fit our narratives about how writing evolves. It's too precise to be proto-writing, too unique to be part of a system. Holding it, or even picturing it, feels like intercepting a message meant for other ears, a whisper from a world where meaning was shaped differently, and maybe that's the lesson. Not every artifact is meant to be solved. Some exist to remind us that the past isn't a puzzle to complete, but a constellation of mysteries, their light still traveling toward us across the centuries. The Toland man lies in his glass case, his face so peaceful he could be sleeping. His leather cap is still snug on his head, his stubble faintly visible along his jaw. But look closer, the noose around his neck, though now frayed with age, tells a different story. This man didn't die in his bed. He was led into a bog 2,000 years ago, hanged, and laid gently in the water, where the peat's cold, acidic embrace preserved him like a time capsule. He's just one of hundreds of bog bodies found across northern Europe, their skin tanned to leather, their features hauntingly intact. These aren't ordinary burials. The bogs were portals to the other world, and these individuals, bound, stabbed, or strangled, were likely sent there on purpose, carrying messages to the gods. What's chilling isn't just the violence, but the care. Many bog bodies show signs of ritual preparation, hair neatly braided, last meals of barley porridge and wild berries, even manicured nails. The Gråbøl man, discovered in Denmark with his throat slit ear to ear, had hands free of calluses, suggesting he wasn't a laborer. Was he a priest? A volunteer. Some bodies were pinned down with wooden stakes or weighed with stones, as if to prevent their return. Others, like the Id girl, bore physical deformities, scoliosis, a clubfoot hinting they might have been chosen as marked intermediaries between worlds. The line between sacrifice and sacrament blurs here, where killing wasn't murder but negotiation, a desperate plea for fertile crops, military victory, or cosmic balance. The objects buried with them deepen the mystery. A leather pouch filled with herbs clutched in a fist, a finely wrought torque twisted around a throat. The Huldremos woman wore a plaid wool skirt and a scarf, her belongings meticulously arranged beside her. These weren't careless disposals, they were furnished journeys. Some theories suggest these were offerings of the elite kings or nobles who gave themselves up in times of crisis. Others argue they were social outcasts, criminals or prisoners of war, their deaths serving as both punishment and propitiation. The truth might be messier. In societies where the divine was inseparable from daily life, a sacrifice could be both honor and horror, depending on who held the rope. The bogs themselves were sacred landscapes. Unlike rivers or mountains, bogs are liminal, neither land nor water, capable of swallowing objects whole and preserving them unnaturally. To prehistoric people, they might have been thresholds where the veil between worlds thinned. The fact that many bog bodies are found near tribal boundaries or ancient roads reinforces this idea they were placed at edges, both physical and spiritual. What lingers isn't just the brutality, but the intimacy of these acts. These weren't anonymous victims tossed into ditches. They were selected, prepared, and dispatched with a precision that speaks of deep belief. When we look at Toland man's face, we're not seeing a corpse. We're seeing a conversation, one side of a dialogue with forces we can barely imagine. And in that silence, we confront an uncomfortable truth. Spirituality hasn't always been gentle. Sometimes it wore a noose. From the ground, the Nazca Desert looks like any other stretch of parched earth, cracked, dusty, unremarkable, but take to the sky and the land transforms. Beneath you, colossal figures emerge as if by magic, a hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with legs perfectly proportioned, a spiral-tailed monkey frozen mid-leap. These are the Nazca lines, geoglyphs so vast they defy logic, etched into the Peruvian desert over 2,000 years ago by a people who couldn't possibly have seen their own handiwork from above. How did they do it? More hauntingly, why, the precision is staggering. Some lines run arrows straight for miles, deviating less than a meter over their entire length. The curves of the animal figures, like the iconic condor with its 96-meter wingspan, are so fluid they could have been drawn with a single stroke. Yet the Nazca had no satellites, no drones, no hot air balloons. Their tools were rudimentary, wooden stakes, ropes, and an intimate knowledge of the land. One theory suggests they scaled down their designs using grids, transferring small-scale models to the desert floor with meticulous measurements. Others propose they used simple surveying tools like the tupu, a knotted cord that could mark distances and angles. But even these explanations don't fully account for the sheer audacity of the project. This wasn't just art, it was a feat of engineering, a collaboration between hundreds of hands moving in unison across generations. Purpose is where the debate ignites. The earliest theories claimed the lines were astronomical calendars, aligning with solstices or constellations. The hummingbird, for instance, points toward the rising sun during the summer solstice, while the spider's legs may mirror the star cluster of Orion. But not all glyphs fit this pattern, and later studies revealed only sporadic celestial correlations. Another hypothesis casts the lines as ritual pathways walked by pilgrims during ceremonies. Footwear found near some geoglyphs supports this imagined processions moving single file along the trapezoids, chanting prayers as their footsteps traced sacred geometry into the earth. Then there's the water connection. The Nazca thrived in one of the driest places on Earth, where rivers surface only a few days a year. Some lines converge on underground aquifers, suggesting they might have been part of a hydrological map or a plea to deities controlling the rains. The spider, a creature associated with water in Andean myth, could symbolize a prayer for fertility. its form a giant invocation etched where every drop was precious. But perhaps the most provocative idea is that the lines were never meant for human eyes at all. The Nazca believed their gods resided in the sky, mountaintops, clouds, the sun itself. What if these glyphs were messages to those deities, offerings so vast they could only be appreciated from the heavens? The act of creation then became the act of worship. Each cleared stone, each smoothed path, was a devotional act, a covenant between earth and sky. The Nazca lines resist easy answers. They're not just puzzles to solve, but mirrors reflecting our own assumptions about art, science, and faith. In their silence, they ask us to consider what we, too, might build if we thought beyond the horizon of our own sight, what monuments we'd leave if we believed the gods were watching. The Terracotta Army emerges from the shadows of history with the same disciplined march that once guarded China's first emperor in life. Unearthed in 1974 by farmers digging a well near Xi'an, this sprawling necropolis wasn't just a tomb, it was an entire underworld metropolis, complete with clay infantry, chariots, and even horses, each crafted with eerie individuality. Over 8,000 soldiers stand in battle formation, their faces so distinct that no two are alike. Some bear the high cheekbones of the steppe, others the rounded features of the southern valleys, as if Qin Shi Huang conscripted not just an army, but an empire in miniature to serve him beyond death. What's staggering isn't just the scale, but the sacred logic behind it. Long before the Qin dynasty, ancient Chinese belief held that the soul split at death, the Han ascending to heaven, the Po remaining with the body. To ensure his Po lacked nothing, the emperor commissioned a clay replica of his imperial guard, replacing the human sacrifices of earlier dynasties with something both grand and grotesquely pragmatic. Each warrior was armed with real bronze weapons, swords still sharp enough to draw blood 2 millennia later, crossbows tensioned as if ready to fire. This wasn't mere symbolism, it was a spiritual arsenal meant to defend against restless spirits or rival kings in the afterlife. The craftsmanship reveals another layer of devotion. Artisans signed their work, leaving fingerprints in the clay like whispered signatures. Chemical analysis shows the kilns burned at precise temperatures to prevent cracking, while pigments blended mineral ores into vibrant purples and greens long since faded. The horses' tendons were rendered with anatomical precision, their nostrils flared as if mid-gallop. Such detail suggests these weren't anonymous laborers but master craftsmen, possibly conscripted from every corner of the empire, their techniques as varied as their faces. Yet the army's true power lies in its paradox. Qin Shi Huang sought immortality through alchemy, sending expeditions to mythical islands in search of elixirs. When that failed, he built this clay eternity, instead a monument not to the divine, but to the man who dared to conquer even death. The soldier's silent ranks reflect his brutal pragmatism. If he couldn't live forever, he'd rule forever, even if his subjects were made of earth and fire. Hidden chambers nearby hint at unexcavated wonders, a palace replica, rivers of mercury mimicking the Yellow River, booby traps described by ancient scribes. The tomb's heart remains sealed, guarded by more than clay, by fear of disturbing what might still sleep inside. In that hesitation, we confront the army's enduring spell. These aren't just statues, they're a king's last decree carved in terracotta and time. That power doesn't end with a heartbeat, and that even the mightiest souls need an army to follow them into the dark. High in the arid cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, a Bedouin shepherd tossed a stone into a cave in 1947 and heard not the expected clatter of rock, but the hollow crack of shattering pottery. What he stumbled upon would become one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Scrolls, a cache of ancient Jewish texts preserved for 2,000 years in the dry darkness of the Judean desert. These weren't just fragments of parchment, they were time capsules safeguarding everything from biblical psalms to apocalyptic visions, community rules to celestial calendars. Their survival is a testament to the desperate care of those who hid them, rolled tight in linen and sealed in clay jars, as if the very words themselves were too precious to lose. The scroll's contents reveal a world of startling religious diversity. Alongside nearly every book of the Hebrew Bible, some differing only slightly from modern versions, others presenting radical variations, were texts like the War Scroll, detailing an epic final battle between the Sons of Light and Sons of Darkness, or the Community Rule, outlining the strict rituals of a reclusive sect many believe were the Essenes. Then there's the enigmatic copper scroll, its metal sheets etched with a cryptic list of hidden temple treasures, their locations described in riddles that still tempt treasure hunters today. This wasn't a monolithic tradition but a vibrant tapestry of belief, where multiple interpretations of sacred texts coexisted, debated, and sometimes clashed. What's haunting is the context of their concealment. The scrolls were likely hidden around 68 CE, as Roman legions crushed the Jewish revolt, burning Jerusalem and its temple. Imagine scribes hurriedly wrapping these documents, knowing their world was ending, hoping someone, maybe centuries later, would find and understand them. The caves became arks, preserving not just ink on leather but the spiritual heartbeat of a people under siege. Some jars were placed with such care that they formed neat rows, while others seemed to have been stuffed hastily into crevices, as if the hiding was interrupted by approaching soldiers. The scrolls also challenge assumptions about sacred texts. Before their discovery, the oldest complete Hebrew Bible dated to the 9th century. The Dead Sea Scrolls pushed that back 1,000 years, revealing how meticulously scribes copied scriptures across generations. A single verse from Isaiah found in the caves matches almost word for word with modern versions, a staggering continuity across millennia. Yet other passages diverge, like the extra psalm in the Great Psalms scroll, reminding us that even the most revered texts were once fluid, shaped by the hands and hearts of those who cherished them. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in their very fragility. The parchment, though remarkably preserved, is often as thin as onion skin, its edges crumbling at a touch. Conservationists now work in climate-controlled labs, using infrared cameras to read letters invisible to the naked eye. The scrolls, once hidden to save them, are now protected behind bulletproof glass, their vulnerability a mirror of our own, our longing to preserve what we hold sacred, knowing time devours all things. In their silence, these texts speak volumes. They tell of faith forged in crisis, of communities clinging to identity when empires sought to erase them. They remind us that sacred objects aren't just about the divine. They're about the human need to reach beyond oblivion, to whisper across the ages, "We were here and what we loved mattered." The Dead Sea Scrolls survived because someone 2,000 years ago believed future generations would need their words, and in that they were profoundly right. The Rosetta Stone might not belong to prehistory, but its impact echoes backward through time, illuminating the very impulse that drove ancient societies to carve their sacred beliefs into stone. Discovered in 1799 by French soldiers digging fortifications near the Nile Delta, this unassuming slab of black basalt became the key that finally cracked open Egypt's silent past. What made it extraordinary wasn't its material or even its age, it was the message it carried, repeated in 3 scripts: hieroglyphs, the elegant demotic script used for daily affairs, and ancient Greek. For the first time, scholars had a linguistic bridge, a way to compare a known language with one that had been mute for centuries. But the stone's true magic lies in its mundane origins. This wasn't a royal decree or a temple hymn, it was a tax document, a bureaucratic nod to Ptolemy V's coronation in 196 B.C. The fact that something so ordinary became the linchpin for understanding Egypt's sacred texts is a reminder that the divine and the daily were often intertwined. Priests used hieroglyphs to inscribe prayers on tomb walls, but the same symbols could appear on grain receipts or boundary markers. The Rosetta Stone blurred the line between the administrative and the spiritual, proving that sacred writing wasn't confined to temples. It pulsed through the veins of everyday life. Deciphering it was a puzzle that consumed scholars for decades. Jean-François Champollion, the French linguist who finally unlocked the code in 1822, didn't just translate words, he resurrected a worldview. Hieroglyphs weren't mere letters, they were tiny works of art combining phonetic sounds with symbolic meaning. A falcon could represent the letter A, the god Horus, or the concept of majesty, depending on context. This wasn't writing as we know it. It was a fusion of poetry and practicality, where every stroke held layers of significance. When Champollion realized that cartouches' oval frames enclosed royal names, he didn't just read pharaohs' titles, he heard their voices across the millennia. The stone's legacy stretches far beyond Egypt. It's a testament to the human drive to preserve meaning, whether etched in clay, painted on cave walls, or stamped into bronze. Prehistoric societies left no Rosetta Stones, no bilingual manuals to decode their spirals and handprints, but the same urgency animated their marks. The Lascaux painter's bison, the Nazca's spider, the Olmec's jaguar gods, these were no less deliberate, no less desperate to say, this is what we revered. This is what we feared. The Rosetta Stone reminds us that every symbol, no matter how alien, was once someone's living language, a way to pin the fleeting divine to something solid. And yet, the stone is also a caution. For all its clarity, it's a fragment, one piece of a larger stele, the rest likely lost to time. Even with its help, chunks of Egyptian history remain opaque, their context crumbled to dust. It's a humbling parallel to prehistoric artifacts. We might never fully grasp the Venus figurine smiles or the Karnak stone's alignment, just as we'll never hear the inflection in a scribe's voice as he carved the stone's Greek text. But that's the gift of these objects. They don't just offer answers. They leave room for wonder, for the possibility that some mysteries are meant to outlast us, whispering from the edges of understanding. The Maltese Islands rise from the Mediterranean like fragments of a forgotten world, their golden limestone cliffs hiding something extraordinary beneath the surface. Here, scattered across this tiny archipelago, stand the oldest freestanding structures on Earth, older than Stonehenge by 1,000 years, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza by nearly 2 millennia. The megalithic temples of Malta aren't just ancient, they're primal, their curved walls and towering altars whispering of a time when humanity first dared to reshape the earth into something sacred. Step inside Haga Kim, its massive stone blocks weathered by 5,000 years of sea winds, and you'll immediately notice something strange. There are no straight lines. The temple's chambers weave into one another in a series of rounded spaces, their walls leaning inward like the petals of a stone flower. This wasn't accidental. The builders deliberately avoided right angles, creating spaces that feel organic, almost womb-like. Some archaeologists believe this curvature was intentional, designed to amplify sound during rituals, a whispered prayer echoing strangely, a drumbeat bouncing between the walls until it sounded like a heartbeat. The central altar, with its spiral carvings and fossil-studded surface, might have been a focal point for offerings, but to whom? The temple's celestial alignments deepen the mystery. At Mnajdra, the southern temple's doorway frames the rising sun during equinoxes, its beams sliding precisely along a carved corridor to illuminate an inner niche. During solstices, sunlight pierces the temple like a golden needle, striking specific stones marked with drilled holes. This precision wasn't luck, it required generations of observation, of tracking the sky's slow dance until patterns emerged. What's haunting is realizing these farmers and fishermen, without writing or metal tools, mapped the cosmos in stone. Their calendar wasn't scratched on parchment. It was built into the land itself, a sacred clock ticking with the seasons. Then there are the fat lady statues, plump female figures with pleated skirts and tiny feet, found broken in temple fragments. Unlike the Venus figurines of prehistoric Europe, these carvings are massive, some originally towering over 2 meters tall. Their exaggerated hips and thighs suggest fertility worship, but their shattered state hints at something darker. Were they ritually killed to release their power? Or destroyed during some upheaval when old gods were overthrown? The temples themselves show signs of violence, altars scorched by fire, chambers deliberately filled with rubble. A civilization doesn't vanish without leaving marks. The most tantalizing clue might be the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a subterranean temple carved 3 stories deep into the living rock. Its echoing, oracle chamber transforms low voices into eerie, resonant tones that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. Here, in the perpetual dark, the bones of over 7,000 people were found, carefully arranged in collective burials. Was this a tomb, a ritual space, or both? The walls swirl with red ochre spirals, symbols that reappear on pottery and temple stones across Malta, as if the island's entire spiritual language was reduced to this single, looping motif. Malta's temples refuse to fit neatly into our narratives about prehistoric religion. They're too sophisticated to be primitive, yet too alien to decode completely. Their builders left no written records, only stones that hum with intention. Walking these corridors, you don't just see history, you feel it. The weight of unanswered questions presses as heavily as the megaliths themselves. Who were the people that moved these stones, not for fortification or shelter, but for something they couldn't touch? What prayers did they whisper into walls that still stand after 50 centuries? The temples won't say, they only keep their vigil, waiting for us to listen harder. Etched into clay fragments and weathered stone across the Balkans, the Vinča symbols have whispered their secrets for over 7,000 years. Discovered near modern-day Belgrade in the early 20th century, these enigmatic markings, simple lines, crosses, and branching patterns, appear on everything from household pottery to ritual figurines. At first glance, they could be mistaken for decorative scratches, but look closer. Their deliberate placement in rows, their repetition across vast distances, their presence on objects buried with care, all hint at something far more profound. Could these be the earliest known writing system, predating Mesopotamian cuneiform by 2,000 years? Or are they sacred sigils, a visual language meant only for the gods? What sets the Vinča symbols apart is their staggering consistency. Over 1,500 artifacts bearing these marks have been unearthed across 5 countries, with certain symbols appearing again and again: a fishbone-like motif, a comb-shaped glyph, a spiral resembling a coiled serpent. Some appear singly, while others cluster in sequences that tantalizingly resemble sentences. The resemblance to later writing systems is uncanny. A bird-shaped symbol from Vinča culture, for instance, bears a striking similarity to the Egyptian hieroglyph for falcon, though separated by millennia and continents. This isn't just coincidence, it's a puzzle wrapped in time. The debate over their purpose splits scholars into passionate camps. One faction argues these are proto-writing, a bridge between abstract symbols and true literacy. They point to the symbols' standardized forms and their appearance on trade goods, suggesting they might denote ownership, quantities, or origins. A pot marked with a particular glyph, found hundreds of miles from its birthplace, could have served as a maker's signature or a cargo label. But another group sees ritual significance. Many inscribed objects come from burial sites or altars, like the famous Vincha goddess figurines, their bodies adorned with symbols that might encode prayers or curses. A bowl bearing a zigzag pattern buried beneath a house's foundation could have been a charm to ward off evil, its marks acting as a spiritual barrier. The most tantalizing clue lies in their evolution. Early Vincha symbols are simple, straight lines, dots, or crosses, but over centuries they grow more complex, branching into compound signs that suggest a developing system. This mirrors how known scripts like Sumerian cuneiform began as basic accounting marks before blossoming into full-fledged writing. Yet without a Rosetta Stone to decode them, the symbols resist conclusive interpretation. Are they a dead-end experiment, a writing system that never fully matured? Or did they serve a purpose we've yet to imagine, a sacred shorthand understood only by initiates? What's undeniable is how these humble marks append our assumptions about prehistory. If the Vincha symbols are writing, they rewrite the story of human communication, placing its origins not in the bureaucracies of ancient Mesopotamia, but in the hearths and shrines of Neolithic Europe. Even if they're merely ritual symbols, their widespread use reveals something extraordinary. A shared visual language spanning thousands of miles, connecting distant communities in ways we're only beginning to grasp. Standing before a Vincha artifact, you're left with a haunting sense of near comprehension. The symbols hover just beyond translation, like a familiar word on the tip of your tongue. They remind us that writing may have begun not with tax records or treaties, but with the human need to pin down the intangible, to carve a prayer into clay, to send a message across time, to say, "I was here, and this is what I believed." And in that, they speak volumes, even if their words remain just out of reach. From the Venus figurines cradled in the palms of our ancestors to the towering megaliths of Malta that hum with celestial alignments, these sacred objects form a bridge across time, a testament to humanity's unshakable urge to reach beyond the tangible. What's astonishing isn't just their age or artistry, but the way they blur the lines between the practical and the profound. A bone flute carved 40,000 years ago wasn't merely a tool for music. It was a vessel for communion, its notes perhaps meant to mimic bird calls or summon the spirits of the hunt. The spiral etched into a Neolithic tomb wasn't just decoration. It mapped the journey of the soul, a cosmic fingerprint left by someone who gazed at the same stars we do today. These artifacts challenge our modern categories. We separate science from religion, art from utility, but to their makers, such divisions would have seemed nonsensical. The Antichithera Mechanism wasn't just a calculator. It was a hymn to the cosmos, its gears turning in reverence to celestial order. The ochre handprints in Lascaux caves weren't mere signatures. They were conduits pressing human presence into the stone alongside the animals they revered. Every object we've explored, whether a shaman's drum or a pharaoh's golden mask, speaks of a world where the sacred wasn't confined to rituals, but woven into the very fabric of survival. And yet, for all we've deciphered, these objects remain stubbornly enigmatic. The Phaistos Disc symbols still guard their secrets. The purpose of Karnak's endless rows of menhirs eludes us. But perhaps that's the point. These mysteries aren't failures of understanding. They're invitations to wonder, to imagine, to keep searching. Every time a new discovery emerges from the earth, like the Nebra Sky Disk or the untouched chambers of Qin Shi Huang's tomb, we're reminded how much history still whispers just beyond our grasp. What ties these fragments together across continents and millennia is their insistence on one truth: to be human is to seek meaning. Whether painted on a cave wall or stamped into clay, these sacred objects are our shared inheritance, proof that curiosity and awe are as ancient as the first sparks of fire. They ask us to look deeper, not just at them, but at ourselves. What will future civilizations make of our own relics? What prayers have we etched into the artifacts of our age? The conversation doesn't end here. Hidden beneath deserts and forests, sealed in caves or submerged in bogs, countless more treasures await. Some may rewrite history, others might forever guard their stories. But each one, no matter how small, carries a piece of the human saga, a reminder that the past is never truly silent. Now it's your turn. Which of these sacred objects resonates with you? What mysteries do you think still lie undiscovered? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've enjoyed this journey through time, hit subscribe to explore more enigmas waiting to be unraveled. The past isn't finished speaking. Are you